Tonight in Arts Unlimited. Vice de Bell conducts the magic flute in Athens. There is a very full diary of arts events. And we pay tribute to artist Cecil Scottness. The South African National Gallery in Cape Town is hosting an exhibition of the work of Cecil Scottness from 1948 to 1996.
A National Art Museum has retrospective exhibitions, which is a way of honoring and acknowledging important artists. And Cecil Scottness is such an artist, and we thought that it would be an appropriate time to do so in the year of his 70th birthday. It is to acknowledge Cecil as a significant artist in South Africa over a very long period of time, but also to pay homage to him as a force in the field of culture and art in the country in general, and particularly the way in which he has assisted young, disadvantaged artists during his lifetime, and he continues to do so.
I turned 70 and they thought it was a good time to push me into history, past history probably. So the museum opened its doors to a retrospective, which meant that one had to find works from the very beginning to the present date. And naturally all the museums in the country assisted very greatly, as did individuals. And hence we have 4 rooms in this marvelous museum filled with what I've done over these years. In 1948, I was making landscapes. My main influences in those days were people like Hank Pierneef. I knew the old gentleman. The major influences came, I suppose, when I met Egon Günther in the 50s. He had come out of Germany as a goldsmith, and he brought very fine pictures with him. And he also established a little gallery. And a few of us, like Eduardo Villa and myself and Catania and Sidney Khumalo, were part of that little stable. And there was an interaction there between us. I think those were important years, and those were formative years. So I was almost unique in making of woodcuts in this country. These very simplified shapes which grew out of the wood block and became the big head constructions that I made afterwards. But it was a marvelous lesson that to be able to simplify what you saw in a landscape. A structure like this could have been anything, like a cleft in a hill or growth on a hill or stones or whatever. And they simplified, grew into the human figure. Yes, I think the most serious development of my early career immediately after art school was having been introduced to black and white woodcut making. In other words, black and white prints off of a block, which I did from 1954 to 1960, where I concentrated almost entirely on the black and white woodcut. And then finally that led to the block being used as a work of art rather than the print coming from it. And finally the block became the introduction to almost my entire future career. The 60s were most important years because I moved away from a simple black and white surface and started to indulge myself in color. I used pigments that I knew about, ochres, which are part of our landscape, ochres, reds, umbers, very few of the cool colors initially, because I wasn't thinking of skies or seas, and began to put the color onto the surface of the wood block and making the artwork a painted, incised painting. In other words, using the incision just as an embellishment towards painting or part of a painting. And so the black and white then became a colored surface, and that was the biggest step forward, I think, right up until the 80s and 90s. sometimes very startling thoughts, because you look at early works and you think, my goodness, why didn't I pursue that? But of course, when you're younger, you can't wait to get rid of it. You see something else. Someone else has made something that you like, so you drag it into your own inner being and try to make it your own. And you cut short movement. Everything seems to be going up at an enormous pace. Once you get to the age of maturity, whenever that is, you tend to linger a bit stylistically, or part of a period, style of a period. You linger, you hang on to it as long as you can, until finally it dies in your hands, and then you move on, you see. And that's why you find enormous unity in the latter years, when you become the picture. In other words, they look at a thing on the wall and they say, that's a Scottness. And they're not referring to a craggy old man, they're talking about a picture on the wall. So between the early years to, say, the beginning of a real style, those are rapid, exciting years. And it was good to look back on them and to find things from that period. I want to make another 150 pictures. That's my first 5-year plan. I think the great advantage of being a professional artist is that you can actually die doing what you're doing. There's no retirement. You're your own boss. You really are not beholden to anybody except your members of your family, and that becomes tenuous sometimes. Your children have grown up and doing what they must do, if you're lucky enough to have had children. But to be able to go into one studio in the beginning of the morning, work as late as you like, get up at the early hours of the morning if necessary and do it, that's a great privilege, a great freedom. And so I don't want to leave it too soon, you know. I drive more carefully these days, and I think, gosh, one bad era and I'll be with my forefathers, and that's not my idea.
This exhibition was recently hosted by the South African National Gallery in Cape Town and has transferred to the Gertrude Posel Gallery in Johannesburg. The Ox and the Sylph, on exhibition at Museum Africa, is a collection of contemporary dance photographs by John Hogg.
Yeah, I've been photographing dance for about 10 years. This collection is largely from the last 5 or 6 years because I've got better pictures from that time. I've selected the exhibition on 2 criteria. One being photographs I personally like or have got meaning for me. Another one is to try and show the diversity of contemporary dance within South Africa. Everything bar one photograph is actually during performance. To dance, you need to be as strong as an ox and as graceful as a sylph. You know, you got to do. It's very, very physical. But it's got to look effortless at the same time. Sometimes you can't make it. Sometimes it can look like it's very physical, but often not. That's the trick. I have, I think, a pretty good understanding of dance, which helps me photograph it.
The 5th International Ballet Competition, hosted by the Pretoria Technikon Dance Department, began this afternoon at the State Theatre.
It gives an opportunity not only for the dancers, you know, to be out there, but also for everyone involved to get together, to exchange ideas, to talk to each other, to communicate, because after all, that's what our art form is all about. It has a story to tell. It has a sense especially the variations that they present from the ballets, because they mustn't forget there are other people around.
The semi-finals are tomorrow night, and the final round on Saturday. Bookings are at CompuTicket. Until the 16th of April, the Karen McCarran Gallery is hosting an exhibition of sculpture and painted wood reliefs by Justin Anschutz. Artist Ilse Paul exhibits Shelf Life at the Rembrandt van Rijn Art Gallery in Johannesburg.
The reason why these objects are here is because they come from a specific place, a specific environment, and within that environment they would either sit on a shelf or somehow they would be next to each other. How these objects have been changed and manipulated, and maybe they become artworks, and maybe they're not artworks, or maybe they were artworks all along. And maybe just the act of doing and living and making art.
Artist Clifford Mapai has risen from humble beginnings. He was the gardener for the Oppenheimer family. They recognized his artistic talent, and before long, Mapai was exhibiting his work. You can see his latest exhibition, which was curated by Karen McCarran, at the Standard Bank Gallery in Johannesburg. Ugeshlangana is a collection of works by artists from Natal and can be viewed at the gallery on Tyrone Avenue in Parkview, Johannesburg. Taking Sides by Ronald Harwood was a triumph both in London and on Broadway.
People in your line of business who got out in 33. Bruno Walter, Otto Klemperer.
But they were Jews. They had to leave. They were right to leave.
You see to it, he's properly guarded. There are so many crazy people about.
It is currently running at the Alhambra Theatre in Johannesburg, directed by Mark Graham and featuring Michael Atkinson and David Clatworthy.
What man can do more?
Then, why is it these? That another conductor, who was actually a member of the party, has already been cleared. I believe he joined the party twice. He has already been cleared and is working again. But I have to wait and wait and wait.
Next week, we take a closer look at the production. Pablo Picasso chats with Albert Einstein as they knock back a few drinks in Picasso at the Lapin Agile, Steve Martin's offbeat comedy, currently at the State Theatre in Pretoria. Tessa Ziegler will be performing at the home of Des and Dawn Lindbergh, 49 St. Patrick Road, Houghton. Up-and-coming international band, Faithless, headline the Camel Experience from the 30th of April until the 3rd of May. Our Camel with the Blues, courtesy of the Johannesburg Zoo. Vice Tabell recently conducted the Magic Flute in Athens. He comments on the future of opera.
The fact that opera and the other so-called Eurocentric art forms are at the moment in a process of standing or finding itself in front of a firing squad, that is true.
Vice Tabell counts amongst those who believe that this art form must be maintained, even nurtured and developed, because opera, he says, belongs to everyone.
Opera, like the arts, is something totally, totally universal. It belongs to all peoples of the world. It is a question of, as far as I'm concerned, the very basic principle of democracy, your own choice. And in our country at the moment, par excellence so, after the democratization process of 1994, thank heavens that it happened, that everybody has got a basic choice of what he wants to attend. And I can tell you one thing, from my experience over the past 16, 17, 18 years, I know that there is a vast interest from all the peoples of our country in this art form also.
Dubell recently traveled to Greece at the invitation of the National Greek Opera to stage, along with other South Africans, an African interpretation of Mozart's The Magic Flute. The opera, in its decidedly African cloth, enjoyed a spectacular success in the Greek capital.
I think it's the recognition in the first place of the standard of operatic activity in our country. But, and it is recognition, certainly, absolutely recognition on an international level. It is, after all, the state opera of Greece.
The South African interpretation of Mozart's Magic Flute attracted more than just favorable comment. Greek cultural commissars described the event as just the beginning of interchange between the two countries.
It's always interesting to discover new talent where you least expect them to be. And I believe that both countries have a lot to offer and to gain by such a cultural exchange.
But opera, Africanized or not, still remains in the dark box. The general perception that the practice and development of so-called Eurocentric art is not quite the done thing has already led to an exodus of artists who see little or no chances for themselves to survive in the country. European opera houses are filled with South African performers who seem to believe that their future will be, and this is not entirely their choice, away from home. Vice Dubell, by no means the most important South African conductor, illustrated the quality and the value of South Africa's opera stage, the classical art as a display window of the country itself. The entire production, filled with essentially a Greek cast, was directed by the South African George Koch, conducted by Dubell, and displayed the more than just fabulous costume and stage designs of yet another South African, Andrew Botha. The pressure is not only on opera, but also by definition on Koch, Dubel, Buta and their many colleagues. A fact which clearly angers Dubel, justifiably proud and satisfied with his Athens victory.
Let me first say this. The whole concept of Eurocentric art is some political craze which somebody thought of who should be crucified for it. And our president has, on how many occasions, called on these people, on the intellectual leaders of our country, please, we need you, stay in our country, let's build our country together. The concern is for those people, but nobody ever thinks. And that is not a golden, but a black thread, a dark thread running through history, that when the artists leave a country, the ship is sinking. That is worrying me at the moment in our country.
Is opera ship sinking in South Africa? Art is also the vehicle with which we show ourselves off to the rest of the world. A powerful tool when you want another nation to get a closer view of who and what you are. Businessmen, after all, prefer to do business with those who they feel familiar with. Many a deal, it could be argued, have been closed in the, yes, elitist environment offered by the opera. A nation is very often measured by the excellence of its art. The classical arts as the barometer of a nation's level of development, the polished face of our society? Question mark.
The taxpayer, and we're all taxpayers, or supposed to be taxpayers in South Africa, we pay taxes to the state not only to take care of our physical, but also of our spiritual well-being. And it doesn't matter what is being said. Nothing is good enough to give the state, in any country, an open door to escape from his obligation as far as the arts are concerned.
Vice Dubel and his colleagues are angry. Achievements such as the showing of a South African interpretation of a Mozart opera in faraway Greece will be difficult, if not impossible, to repeat in the future. A future that will certainly pay less attention to what is in scoffing terms referred to as Eurocentric art. In the meantime, Dubel knows that he has every right to feel proud of his achievements, and Athens seems sufficiently impressed.
I stand sometimes there with tears in my eyes. Die bootjie van die Vrystaat.